Hello everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Dr. Golshan Madraki and welcome to the next episode of College of Business, University of New England, Center of Supply Chain. So as you may know, I'm a professor of supply chain management, and supply chain is my expertise, is my love, is my everything. And today we have an amazing guest here, Dr. Anderson. How are you doing, Dave?
Hello, Golshan.
Thank you for being here. It's our pleasure to have you here. So let's start with Dave. Dr. Anderson, tell us the story. A lot of students, prospective students, might watch us. Move us back to when you were undergrad at University of Connecticut. What happened? Tell us the story of your life.
Supply chain management was non-existent in the 1960s when I was in undergraduate program at UConn, and I finally decided that I loved economics and that was what I was going to major in. That was helped by my failing organic chemistry, so convinced me not to be a chemical engineer. And so I spent my undergraduate time as an economics major, then decided that I liked it so much that I went on to get my PhD at Boston College in econometrics and finance. And you know, we still haven't brought in the supply chain connection yet, but I also at that time was getting my PhD. I had two children that needed to eat and have diapers every day, and so I had to work. And nearby there was the U.S. Department of Transportation center called Transportation Systems Center in Kendall Square, right next to MIT, and they were looking for people to work in doing various studies in transportation for the U.S. government. One of them was something called Project Independence, which was back when Jimmy Carter was president of the United States, and we had an energy crisis, and I was a big contributor to that, especially in how we would transport fuels and everything of that nature. And I just sort of got into transportation and logistics, and most of it was, that's what it was called back then, was like, there was no supply chain words that came out till quite a bit later. And so that's where it started. I then spent the better part of 35 years consulting in the supply chain space. Ended up as a managing partner of Accenture, and retired in 2001, and after having spent a load of time in many supply chain revolutions. The first one was motor carrier and airline deregulation in the 1960s. Then was globalization. Then was COVID, and perhaps now we talk a bit about this later. Now it's artificial intelligence.
Do you mind if you just tell us a little bit about all of these big, huge things that happened during your career? How was the life at the time? What was your main concern? How did you actually encounter all of those challenges?
You know, as a consultant, you get called in when someone else doesn't know what to do about something.
True.
And so you would bring in a consultant to say, geez, how would motor carrier deregulation affect my supply chain? Historically, if you wanted to move a load of empty ginger ale bottles between Akron and Newark, New Jersey, you would have to apply for a certificate for that movement on that lane between those 2 points, and it could take a month to get a certificate to move something. Today we would never think of that.
Yeah.
But if that's the way you ran your company before, having to get all sorts of approvals to move freight anywhere, all of a sudden you can move freight anywhere with no restrictions, you would start to say things like, well, gee, do I have too many warehouses? Or maybe I could do more expedited shipping instead of, sticking to very specific lanes and things of that nature. So that becomes a complex question that supply chain professionals are asked every day. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. you need to be able to use technology to look at those questions, and that's, I think, the underlying beauty of what you have in supply chain management, is that you're able to think, oh, I know how to solve that, and you're sitting across the table with somebody who really has no idea. It's not that they are stupid, it's just that they never faced this question before. So, mm-hmm. so every time you have these revolutions, it upends supply chains. Globalization was the same thing. Okay, I used to sell all my products in the US. How do I set up a global logistics network to start selling in Europe, to start selling in Africa, to start selling in Asia, right? Now maybe I want to start sourcing product there, so I have to have a whole upstream network to source those products. And so the complexity rises dramatically under those situations. And then that's what I did. I came in those situations, and I worked with global companies to figure out how they could structure their supply chains to meet those demands, and how to do it efficiently, effectively, and to meet service levels. That really was a summation of the typical type of 35 years I spent doing it in my life, and I enjoyed it immensely, because every day you wake up, there was a new challenge, there were new things to do, you had another problem you were facing that you had to figure out with your team, and overall it was a very satisfactory and fascinating life, because you were solving real problems, basically on a daily basis. You weren't just sitting behind a desk and trying to figure out some finance numbers, which I soon got out of that business.
It's like solving a big puzzle that it gets more exciting and more complex, and all the more pieces are coming through. That's
right.
So so true.
Right.
Okay, now I have next question. So out of these big revolutions, which one do you think has the most impact of creating the supply chain area? Because as you said, back in 1980s or 1990s, there were no supply chain, right?
Well, there always has been a supply chain. I mean, the interesting thing is supply chain, I call it the greatest invention of capitalism, and I also call it sometimes the greatest curse, and I'll explain that. By being the greatest creation is that you want to move a package, just a small package, from China to the United States. You could have 100 different people, companies involved in that process. Someone's got to package that product in China. Someone has to then move it to the port for export. There has to be customs people involved to make sure it has the right codes on the packages and all that. There have to be arrangements made with shipping companies, all for this one tiny package, and then it has to go across the ocean, and the same thing happens on the other side. And so, but the interesting thing is, and people often ask me this question, well, who controls these supply chains? And I say, nobody. I mean, that's the fascinating part of it. Nobody controls them. They're all independent companies working together, handing off data and physical goods to the next party to move it along that chain. And it really has resulted in the world we have today, because you're able to do that simply, without a lot of hassle, and without a lot of regulation, and as a result, you have this system that's built up over time that really is not in anybody's control per se, right? Now, the reason I say it can also be the greatest curse of capitalism is you have things that are evolved like, let's name names, Shane and Temu, coming out of China with, inferior goods, perhaps made with slave labor in certain cases, flooding markets with subsidized prices. That's also possible because of supply chains. Now limited because we did away with what's called de minimis, which meant no tariffs under products less than $800. But it allowed the development of a lot of the curses of capitalism, which are landfills full of fabric worn once and thrown away, and goods that fall apart after 2 uses and what have you. So it's, on one hand, it's made for the development of our global economy. On the other hand, it also has some really interesting and sometimes nasty externalities associated with it.
No, that was actually perfectly said. Thank you. I've never even looked at it as the biggest curse of the capitalism. That's also very interesting. Now that you are actually experiencing 35 years of supply chain challenges, concerns, as far as I understand, you describe a lot of data and information flow as well as goods and products flow. Do you mind if you can talk about supply chain and services? Because we know all that services also is part of the supply chain network.
We just talked a bit about services, in that to make a product move, one has to. There are many services that are involved, in doing that. And that was what I did historically. It's mostly moving physical goods or materials through the supply chain. The services supply chains are can be quite different, right? And but they also involved, in many cases, it's the same thing. If you're a hospital providing services to patients, you've got this whole back end set of logistics that provides a huge amount of product that's used in that environment. Simultaneously, you're also trying to manage the services supply chain in the hospital. It would be staffing, it would be daily activities, and the whole services supply chain can simultaneously be parallel to the physical supply chain. But they, one's running a bunch of humans, the other one's running a bunch of product, and they're both equally important. And I think, matter of fact, if I look back, the whole services supply chain is generally is less considered less than the physical supply chain. You often have plenty of product available, in a facility, but you manage that poorly, right? You haven't set up the systems, the services side of it, to manage where that inventory is held, who replenishes those inventories at a nurse's station, who does the ordering, what about dealing with special orders when I need a replacement knee for somebody that has to come in overnight, or what about transplant organs, how are they moved through the system? All very exotic sets of services. And it's one of the interesting pieces of UNE is that we have the health professions, which require very significant amount of product moving into that, number one. But number two, it requires managing those services, the delivery of those services simultaneously. And that's what that's what you get in UNE, is you get exposure to both of those sides of the equation.
Supply chain and services industry that, for example, hospitals or UNE has a huge communities in medical professional and healthcare, and many of you guys watching, or maybe you current UNE health professions that are thinking about getting MBA in supply chain, and we would highly recommend it, because as you can see, regardless of the type of the industry, is either a flow of product, like a physical product, or a flow of human and services and intangible products. Even in the entertainment industry, you can see the supply chain. So supply chain is everywhere. And I'm so glad that we have this conversation. I'm gonna actually talk about the next question, because you actually mentioned something about UNE. So Dave, you've been a huge contributor to UNE. You're a great friend of UNE. What is your favorite things about University of New England? Why UNE?
Besides the fact I live down the street from it, so it takes me 2 minutes to get to the campus.
Neighbor.
You know, I've gone to some great schools, UConn and Boston College, and even today I teach at MIT, and you know, I've been approached by many of those institutions to be on boards, to obviously contribute, and I have given professorships to other schools, particularly Boston College. But what I've liked about UNE, and honestly, they don't need my help. Really, they're huge schools. Lots of highly educated alumni can contribute to it. And when I got to start 15 years ago, I was asked to be on the board, and I went and I met with a lot of professors. I met with a lot of the president and all. There was 2 or 3 presidents before the current president, and what impressed me is that it was a place that cared about each and every student. I mean, it isn't that if you're at BC or UConn that they aren't great schools. But they were pretty impersonal as far as I was concerned. You know, you went to your classes, you did your stuff, and you know, you went and studied, took your test, got your degree, and left. And that's an old school model, which doesn't exist here. Here, I found the faculty was interacting every day with the students, in getting them involved in different research projects, getting them involved in getting internships, making sure that everybody's experience was very individual and very focused on helping them be successful long term. And I said, boy, this is a place that I really relate to as one that cares a lot about the student. And at the core of a university are the students. They're the most important part of this university. When I served on the board, and I was chairman for 4 years, that's what I remind everybody, every board meeting. We're here for the students. We're not here for God love the faculty, God love the administrators, God love the staff. You know, we're here for the students. That's every decision we need to make is for the benefit of the student body and to make things better for them. Every dollar we spend, you know, everything we do to make the university better, and every new building we add, et cetera, it has to be something that is for the students. And that has continued in the time I've been involved here. I'm not on the board anymore. I still am very involved in the university, but it's still the same. It's still really focused on the individual and making sure the individual is everything they need to be successful. And that's why I love it.
Thank you. And just to remind everybody that Dave is part of the advisory board of College of Business now. We are very honored to have him on board, and we have amazing experts, entrepreneur, business owners, successful people on board to help us to actually connect us to real world, to industry, unlike many of other academic institutions that they just focus on theory. At UNE, we are really caring about how to connect this theory to real world and real story. If you don't mind, I want to actually switch a gear to what you said earlier about supply chain and AI. Artificial intelligence is apparently the biggest revolution nowadays in all fields, including supply chain. So how would AI impact supply chain area?
Maybe a little bit of explanation before that. 25 years ago, after I retired from Accenture, I founded a company called Supply Chain Ventures, which is a venture capital firm that invests in supply chain companies. So, I spend my days, and the firm is still very active. It's myself and a bunch of partners that we spend every day investing in the future of supply chain, mostly in technology. We don't do a lot of hardware, although we have done some robotics and stuff. But we're pretty much focused on software and especially in the spaces of supply chain design, supply chain planning, supply chain execution, the three major pieces of how you manage your supply chains today. So, and we've been through lots of revolutions during that process. We've been through the e-commerce revolution in supply chain, where that had a major impact on how one would look at your distribution process. How do you get something to somebody overnight and not, historically it was very linear. You'd go into a store, you'd go to the shelf, you'd pick something up, you'd check out, buy it, and go get in your car and go home. Today you expect to get up in the morning and there's UPS, FedEx, DHL, Uber, Lyft, somebody on your doorstep dropping a package for you that last night at 8 o'clock at night you decided I needed something, and here you can get it all overnight. So there's been tremendous revolutions that have continued to take place in supply chain, and as Golshan said, the AI piece to me is one of the major ones that I've seen historically in this business. It's radically changed the way I have to look at investing. And what I mean by that is, when I used to invest in a company, you'd say, someone would come to me with an idea and say, we're going to need $5 million over the next bunch of years to develop this. And it's going to take me 18 months to build the first technology. Then I'm going to do pilots with clients, making that technology better. Then I'm going to hire salespeople and marketing people and customer support people. And by that time, we're 7 years out on the learning curve, right? Mm-hmm. Today, when we're looking at go to market for a supply chain startup, we're looking at the technology because of AI, because of companies like or solutions like Claude, which writes your own software, that you can write that software in a few months. Wow. And you can then start market testing it. So we've seen the compression of a supply chain investment go from having to think, okay, well, I might get some money back in 7 years, to looking at it and saying, well, I better start getting it back in 3 years, because AI has just revolutionized how we deliver all those services. I don't have to, for example, I don't have to have this huge support staff that people call up, they got an issue with the software, it can be done with process automation, using AI, answer those kind of questions which are common, how do I log in? All those silly little questions that are associated with software. And that all takes place today, in a framework that used to require a lot of people that it doesn't require anymore. Now, the important thing to remember, that doesn't mean that everybody's job's going to disappear. Sorry to say, you're going to graduate if you're coming to UNE in 2026, you'll graduate 2030, and you're not going to go home and sit on your couch and have some mythical payment come out of the sky that you don't ever have to work again because AI is doing all the work for you. That's nonsense. It's never going to happen. There's still plenty of work to do in supply chain. The difference is going to be is that it's going to be much higher level. It's going to require much more thinking rather than doing about things. AI is going to give you the ability to do a lot of different things. You just have to think about what you have to do and how to do that better. Then you just say, let's design a bot that's going to go do this issue. It's going to go do, and I always get this question every day from the head of retail about what's my inventory position in all my stores. Well, historically, that might take you a morning to figure out pounding the keyboard. Now you can go back and say, hey, computer, you're AI voice enabled now. Tell me what the stuff is at stores. Tell me what's going on in stores.
Type.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And then ChatGPT, make that into a nice memo for the head of retail and send it right off to him. And then I'm here waiting for the next question to come. But more importantly, I'm starting to think about, well, what else? How else do I automate all this stuff? Because, if I can do that, I can start automating many other things. And so it's going to be a fascinating future for anybody who's in the supply chain world, that you're not going to have the drudgery of answering the same question 50 times, every month. You're going to be able to design the capabilities to do those, answer those questions, and you're going to have the ability to think about strategically, how would I do something differently in supply chain going forward? I have time to think about that now. I'm not spending all my time answering mindless questions that could easily be answered by the computer. So it's going to be an exciting time to go into supply chain. I think one of the most exciting, because it's going to be upper level thinking. It's not going to be, I got to go there and I got to spend a lot of time entering stuff into the computer and getting some answers for somebody, and do that 20 times a month. That's not a lot of fun, and it's not your future.
Well said, and I cannot agree more. Yeah, that's true. So great news for all of us, guys. So thank you so much, Dave. At the end, do you have any final note or any advice for anyone, prospective students, current students, or anyone outside the field that might be interested in entering supply chain area?
Answer it on two levels. One, and this goes for anybody, I mean, the key to being successful in any business is being inquisitive, number one. Number two, it's building your network. I live and die as a venture capitalist, on my network. People will call me this morning, with a new idea, call me offering, I've known you for years, Dave, and I hear you're looking for somebody to help out in how to integrate AI into the brokerage space. I said, yeah, Timmy, I was looking for somebody like that. And he said, well, I'm available. He said, okay, let's start talking about it. So the network drives a lot, and the third is to be a strategic thinker. It's one thing to be acquisitive. It's one thing to have a good network, but you have to think strategically. Anybody that doesn't is not going to be able to sell themselves, because you sell yourself not by saying I can do this. It's saying I've been thinking that we can do this differently, and that's how that advances knowledge, advances society. makes life a lot better for everybody. So that's how I'd look at it. And to the second part of the question would be, if you're a you're studying in the medical profession, for example, and you say, geez, I look at a hospital. I want to be a doctor, but I also, when I interned at these hospitals, I thought, my God, these have the most archaic logistic systems you could imagine. And boy, if I spent another year getting an MBA in that, I could go be an administrator, and understand how the hospital works and better provide services, but I can also clean up that miserable supply chain as well. So that's really, I think, a big opportunity in the healthcare space. To me, it's got one of the most archaic logistics systems in the planet. But well, that's for another day's discussion.
As a potential patient, I absolutely agree, and I sometimes experience it by myself. So, thank you so much. That was a very fruitful, very exciting discussion, and I hope we can have another conversation, hopefully on very specific topics. But thank you for watching us. That was it. Another episode of our YouTube channel series, which is the product of Supply Chain Center, University of New England, College of Business. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Dr. Golshan Madraki, and that was our beautiful conversation with Dr. Anderson. Have a great day, and please, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe us. Thank you. Bye.